What's up, guys? This is Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's video, I'll be doing a little bit different video, I guess, as far as this isn't part of any series that I've been doing. This is just something that I randomly thought of, but I think this video, just standing by itself, will really help a lot of you guys that are in the stages of your poker careers where you're possibly just trying to become more fundamentally sound, trying to find ways to increase your win rates. So without further ado, 5 ways to increase your poker win rate right now. Start turning losing sessions into winning sessions. The first way to do this is start playing tighter and more aggressively pre-flop. The problem is I see a lot of you guys limping and cold calling open raises too frequently pre-flop. You are playing too passively, too weak of a range. You're often putting yourself out of position in a multi-way pot. These will often be recipes for disaster. And you want to start by cleaning up your ranges, by calling with a stronger range, by folding a lot of the weaker hands that you guys are limping with or cold calling with. Start to open raise more hands in position and 3-bet possibly more from in position as well. You can take a lot of those speculative hands that you are either limping behind or limping or cold calling with and start turning them into more aggressive plays. Start adding those to your open raising ranges. Start trying to isolate limpers with these hands. Start 3-betting more from in position. So clean up your ranges a little bit. Stop limping and cold calling too frequently with too wide of a range. You'll start to see your win rate increase. And the one final point on this slide that I want to make, which is kind of, I guess, a point that's overshadowing this entire video, is you want to make your opponents think you are tough to play against. You want to be really tough as hell, an opponent that you want to be the type of player that when you sit down, your opponents are like, man, I don't want to play against this guy. And one of the ways to start building your image to that level is to start just playing more aggressively and playing a lot of these better cards from out of position and start to really open your range up and just be really tough in position, guys. So start playing tighter, start playing more aggressively pre-flop. The second way to increase your win rate is to start making better continuation bets. The problem is you guys are c-betting too frequently from out of position. You're c-betting on boards that do not hit your range well, and they hit your opponent's range well. I think that I see a lot of players that probably have read a poker book somewhere that said, hey, you're the pre-flop raiser, you should just c-bet and continue to tell your story of strength. The problem is your story doesn't often check out on many flop textures, and any competent thinking opponent is going to know this. So the fix is to start checking more from out of position, especially on boards that don't hit your range well. But to protect your checking range and your range overall, you're going to want to start checking back, or you want to start checking some hands that are strong, such as pocket kings on a board that's bad for your range, such as 6-5 deuce rainbow. I think that if you guys have an opponent that is very poor and doesn't think about anything like ranges or is a level, zero thinker type of deal, then yeah, go ahead and just bet your good hands for value. Check your bad ones pretty much. It's a very exploitive strategy, but it's going to be the best way to go. But I think a lot of opponents these days are starting to understand what ranges are, basically like range versus range interaction, even if it's on the most rudimentary level. They're starting to understand continuation bets and things like frequencies a little bit more. So I think you guys definitely want to be mindful about how often you're betting, I guess c-betting specifically from out of position. Another good example to give you guys is, let's say that you c-bet ace-jack of spades on 10-7-3, and I've got two different 10-7-3 flops there. They look the same, but on the first flop, you have the overcards and the backdoor gutter. The second flop, however, you have backdoor spades as well. So I would check more often on this first flop and bet more often on the latter. If you are deciding to c-bet from out of position, you want to become more efficient, and you do this by you do this by basically planning out your hand to where you have a lot of turn and river cards that are going to be good cards for you to barrel. So become more efficient. Take a few extra seconds before you just blindly c-bet to determine if you're making a good c-bet in the first place from out of position. Start making better continuation bets from out of position. And this starts by checking more often and becoming more efficient. The almost exact reverse of that is attack bad continuation bets. The problem is you give the out-of-position pre-flop raiser too much respect when they continuation bet, especially on boards that are good for your range. And you fix this by starting to raise or float these bad CBETS more often, especially if the pre-flop raiser CBETs at a very high frequency on most board textures, especially those bad for his range. Especially if the pre-flop raiser overfolds to flop raises, or if the pre-flop raiser has a very low turn barrel frequency. So if you see an opponent who c-bets something like between 80 and 100% of the time when he's the pre-flop raiser from out of position, and all of a sudden your heads up with him, and he c-bets a board of 9-6-3, and let's say you have 7-6 suited with a backdoor suit. If my opponent c-bet into me and I knew that he was c-betting at too high of a frequency, I would raise with this combo 100% of the time, and I would put him in a really tough spot. I think most opponents will under-defend against this, and when they do defend, they're very easy to play against because they're only continuing with hands that are at the very top of the range, and they're not going to have these hands often enough, so this strategy was going to be the most profitable. And to talk about the third point a little bit, if the pre-flop raiser has a very low turn barrel frequency, then you can reduce your risk of the flop raise by just floating and just calling, and then preparing to bet when he checks to you on the turn. But the whole point of this concept and the third way to increase your win rate is I think that I do not see you guys raise flop bets enough. You give way too much respect to the pre-flop raiser out of position when he decides to c-bet. Start attacking their c-bets, especially when the board does not hit their range that well. If you know that your opponent c-bets at a really high frequency, no matter pretty much any board texture besides one that really smacks his range hard, really start to put him in tough spots. Start raising more often. Start becoming tougher to play against, guys. Be tougher to play against. I cannot stress this enough. The fourth way to increase your win rate is barrel the turn more often. The problem is I see you guys make good c-bets if you are on this level, but you don't fire the turn often enough, and it allows your opponent to realize their equity far too often. The fix is to start firing more turn barrels against most opponents on turns that are either good or neutral for your range. So here's some examples. First one, you have king jack of diamonds. Flop comes queen 8-7. So you've got an over, backdoor straight, backdoor flush. Turns a two of clubs. So a very brick-like card, very neutral for both ranges. Your opponent who limp called will often have a lot of weak hands on this board though, and they're going to fold to a sizable turn bet with hands such as a pair of eights, pair of sevens, straight draws. Guys, I even see opponents fold hands like queen jack and queen 10 in this spot. They just assume that you're not going to be betting with worse or bluffing enough. If you are, they don't want to face a river bet, so they just go ahead and just let it go. They're hoping that they can check call the flop and that you check back the turn, and it makes the river very easy for them to play. What have I been harping on you guys, or basically telling you guys to do? Be tougher to play against. Barrel this type of turn card in the spot. You'll be surprised at how often your opponent basically overfolds the turn here. Second example, you have ace-3 of hearts. Flop comes 8-5 deuce. You have the gut shot, backdoor flush, one overcard. Turn comes a queen of hearts, and I see a lot of you guys check this card back to try and see a free river. You don't want to get check raised. You have a lot of outs to the river. However, your opponent in this situation calls your cutoff open raise from the big blind, and he check calls the flop. His range is quite wide. It should be very weak in this spot. Barrel this turn card and avoid the temptation to take the free card, as you can fold out a bunch of your opponent's hands that are better, and it's essentially on a card that is better for your range. So the whole point of this concept and how to increase your win rate, guys, barrel the turn more often. Barrel cards that are good for your range, that are possibly neutral for your range, and you'll be surprised at how often your opponents are folding. They are over folding in this spot, I promise you guys. The fifth and possibly most important, I guess, concept of these 5 ways to start increasing your win rate, start value betting the river more often. The problem is you guys get scared to bet your medium to decently strong hands on bad rivers, and you start checking back. The fix is to essentially start bet folding the river for thinner value way more often. Here is one example, I believe. I do not have multiple, so excuse that mistake. You have king queen on king jack 3, 8 queen, where the river brings in the spade flush, and it also brings in 2 different kinds of straights. Your opponent check calls on the flop and turn and has checked to you on the river. I see most opponents in this spot check behind, fearing the flush and or the straight. You guys need to bet this spot against most opponents. Most every opponent you guys are up against in the spot isn't going to be bluffing even close to a correct frequency on the river. Not even close. I put that in caps for a reason. This means that they're always going to call with pretty much usually worse, and they're only going to raise with better. When they do call you, are they sometimes going to show you straights or the flush? Of course, but they very often are calling you with many worse hands, guys, such as ace queen, worse kings, and worse two pairs. And yeah, I understand that you guys are sitting here and you're probably thinking, well, Nick, I don't think somebody's going to call with ace queen on this particular river on this run out. You're probably right more often than not. But guys, I've seen it again. I've seen players, they will call you with worse in this spot. And if they raise you, it's a very easy bet fold. And you guys need to go into this type of river knowing what type of opponent you're against. If it's an unknown opponent in a live low stakes games, just bet fold. Your opponents, like I said, will not be bluffing at even close to the correct frequency. If you know the opponent is tricky or a very tough opponent and they can bluff you in this spot, potentially off your hand, just check back and realize your showdown value and your equity. But against most unknown opponents or lower skilled, live low stakes opponents, go ahead and bet fold the river. You guys will see your win rates increase substantially. So start to incorporate these 5 concepts into your guys' games and you'll begin to see your win rates increase. I promise you that. Start to add each of these slowly if you need, time to understand each of them, but I think they're pretty simple, and I think if you guys start to do it, you'll definitely start to make more money. So as always, thanks for watching. If you guys have any comments or questions or feedback about the presentation of the video, with it being, PowerPoint slides, or if you guys want to see more videos like this, just let me know. So until next time, this is Nick from Arch City Poker. Take care.